Hi, I'm Paul Comfort, and this is Transit Unplugged, the top podcast globally where we interview public transportation executives. We're now over 300 podcasts in our 7th year, and we're excited to continue to bring you innovative programs such as this, which is part 3 of our series of our Western trip through the United States. We started in Sacramento and then went to Anchorage, the largest city in Alaska, then took a 12-hour ride on the Alaska Railroad up through Denali National Park, where they had just had wildfires, and they had just opened up the park just a few days before we actually went through it on our train. They were concerned they may have to keep it shut. We were in touch with them, but we made it, and then went up to Fairbanks. And man, when we got there, the weather broke. It had been rainy all the time, and it was crisp and clear and beautiful. And most of this podcast is recorded outside with people, walking around. It's just a really fun podcast. Again, in-person, story-based. I think you'll love it. Last week, as I started with Alaska's largest city, we talked about what transportation was like there in a large city. This is a smaller city, the Fairbanks itself, but the region itself that they serve, they actually serve a borough, which is kind of like a county, which is much bigger, almost 100,000 people. And it includes, can you believe it, of all things, a city called the North Pole. We actually visited there, and I went to Santa's house and got some fun pictures taken. We put all this on Transit Unplugged TV. Everything you hear on this podcast, you can actually see with other portions of it as we're talking about it. On this podcast, I talked with the head of Transit, Michelle Denton, also with transportation planner from the local MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Corey DiRutigliano, and transportation manager, Dey Johnson. You'll hear from all 3 of them in this episode. But before we dive into transit and transportation in Fairbanks, I thought we'd give a little context with a conversation that I had with Corey. We were at a place called the Pump House, which he describes what that's about. We sat on the banks of the Chena River under a beautiful, crisp sun. It wasn't sunset because remember, they've got sunlight for 21 hours during the time I was there. But it was at a time when it might be sunset down here around 6 o'clock at night. And we start off by talking about how it all began. Corey gives me a rundown on Fairbanks. Take a listen. So we're sitting here doing this on a great summer day where it's beautiful here in Fairbanks, and we're on the Chena River. And we're at a place called the Pump House, and this is kind of where Fairbanks, modern Fairbanks, kind of got its start, right? With the gold, people coming up here for gold, and the pump house would pump water out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Fairbanks, really, the modern city was established around the gold rush. That's when a lot of the infrastructure was built up. The pump house facility that we're at right now was essentially a water inlet for an area where they'd draw water up, pump it up over the hills in the surrounding area, and then they'd use that to essentially power wash the hillsides as part of the gold, rush operations. So they'd use the pumps, they'd load it into these, kind of like cannons, and it would spray the hillsides. And then they'd take that slurry and run it through, various types of filters and sieves, and then, find gold out of that. Yeah.
Yeah. We were on a boat cruise today, and he was saying down this one part of the river on the banks, they had found what today would be the equivalent of $7 billion worth of gold. So there really was gold up in them dar hills, as they say. Huh?
It's pretty intense. Yeah. And actually, Fairbanks is kind of in the middle of what was a number of gold camps. So some of those include Fox, Esther. They're kind of all miles apart from one another. And there was actually, at one point, a small gauge railroad that connected all of these, sort of like a very early transit system that took people from, out in the gold camps and brought them into town, or vice versa.
And we got to ride one of those small gauge trains just the other day, and what's called Pioneer Park?
Yep. Yeah. Pioneer Park was the site of the 1967 Expo here in Fairbanks, and it was a way to celebrate the recent statehood of Alaska becoming the 49th state in 1959.
A big part of what defines Fairbanks is its history and its geography. As the largest city in the northern part of the United States, it's the largest big city that's considered an urban area up in there. It is the industrial and transportation hub between oil fields to the north and Anchorage and beyond to the south. After the gold ran out, Fairbanks really didn't see a resurgence until World War II, and he'll tell you why. And then again in the 1970s with the Alaska oil pipeline. Corey talks about these big events to bring us to the present-day city of Fairbanks.
Yeah, so, this place really developed as kind of an industry town, and a lot of it was just moving material around, and it was less concerned with things like sidewalks. and bike paths, and really developed under this kind of heavy, like what you see of a lot of the modern transportation is developed during the pipeline, which was in the late 60s, early 70s.
We got to see that pipeline too. What's that called? The Trans-Alaska?
The Trans-Alaska pipelines. That's the 700-mile plus line that runs from the North Slope all the way down to the South Coast in Valdez. So there was this huge influx of money and resources, but it was all really purpose-built to just try to, churn out materials to help, the construction of that.
That's really interesting. Just to pause for a minute. The place gets start with a look for gold, and then there go what they call black gold, right, in the Beverly Hillbillies, right?
Yeah.
So pretty wild. Interesting.
Well, and there was a layover in the Lend-Lease program during World War II. So this community is really a series of boom and bust sort of periods. It had gold to start, and then it had in the 1940s, planes would fly up from the lower 48. They would land here in Fairbanks. They'd be outfitted, they'd strip all the U.S. Air Force stuff out of them, overlay them with the Russian stuff, and then the Russians would fly them off to fight in World War II. So there was a lot of military buildup.
Corey's a planner with Fast Planning, the MPO for the borough of Fairbanks, and he took me out to check a little nature, but with a purpose. Fairbanks is surrounded by what's called discontinuous permafrost tundra, and it's that permafrost that presents a unique challenge to a very basic piece of infrastructure, roads. We're outside now in Fairbanks, walking through a field. Tell me where we're at, Corey.
So we're at Creamer's Field. It's a migratory bird refuge right here in the middle of town. It's the site where a lot of birds come annually for migratory activities, and it's also a year-round destination to witness wildlife and sled dog racing, a number of different activities.
And it is just beautiful out here. We're on a brilliant, bright, sunny day, about 65 degrees. Humidity is low. I just love it out here, man. You were telling me that when you come to Alaska, it's an active choice, right?
Yeah, this isn't necessarily a place that you can just coast and live in. It's active. It gets really quite cold in the winter, minus 50 Fahrenheit, and it can get up to around 90 or 95 in the summer in some of the most extreme temperatures. And it's just, it's a place that you have to love to be. And, I think you see that in the kind of culture and active participation of everyone here.
This is just fantastic where we're standing right now. There's describe what we're seeing, these flowers and the white trees there. And
yeah, so right now we're standing in a field of fireweed. We've got some raspberries here and strawberries, and the fireweed can grow up to 6 or 7 feet tall. You see enormous plants when you go to the botanic gardens. So we've got this super intense but very short growing season. And right now we're seeing some of the visuals from that.
And you said the flowers, the fire flowers, they indicate at which part of the summer you're at?
Yeah, so the fireweed it's kind of a long conical flower structure, and it blooms from the bottom up. And the locals here sort of say that based on how high up it's bloomed, that's how much summer you've got remaining. So right now we're about, some of these are saying a third, some are saying a half, and here in July that seems about right. Fairbanks is an area in the interior of Alaska that's considered to have discontinuous permafrost. North of the Brooks Range, the ground is completely frozen, and then south of the Alaska Range down by Anchorage, it's mostly thawed. So that means that we're in an area where small nudges can really change ground conditions. And what we're looking at in front of us here is an area which, when I moved here in 2011, was a completely intact birch forest. High canopy, just really prolific. And after a few heavy rain events and some standing water through a couple seasons, that completely changed the soil regime and the amount of ice that was in the ground. What was pretty stable, ice-laden ground is now completely thawed, and we're looking at a rapid change from a birch forest essentially into a wetland.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a pond in front of us almost.
Yep.
And the permafrost, tell me what that does.
So the permafrost, by definition, means it's ground that's permanently frozen for the year. It does thaw a bit in the summer months, but it's also really sensitive to small environmental changes. So, you'll see in areas where the tundra is undisturbed, if you put a road on it, that road will start to act like a heating element or like a hot wire on it, and it can start to thaw the immediate ground in that area. What that does is it creates frost heaves. It means the ground breaks up much more regularly. It means increased maintenance costs, potholing, holes, things like that. So the permafrost is really delicate, and what we try to do is if it's frozen, keep it frozen. You try not to disturb what's already there, okay. But inherently the roads end up making quite a mess of things.
This sense of working with the environment instead of trying to conquer it is reflected in something that's very Alaskan, something called dry cabins. Hear more from Corey about this experience that he had living in one. Tell me about that place you used to live in. I thought that was pretty interesting.
The dry cabin?
Tell me about the dry cabin.
So dry cabins are, it's sort of the confluence of the cost of construction is quite high. So simpler structures are not only easier to construct, but they're easier to maintain, and they're a bit more resilient when it comes to these low temperatures. So, at minus 40, minus 50, it doesn't really matter how thick your walls are or how well insulated, they're still prone to freezing. And if you live in a dry structure with no pipes,
no running water,
yep, exactly, then your structure is a bit more robust and less prone to damage.
And how do you live like that?
We have water fill stations. The water wagon's one of them. And people carry 5-gallon blue jugs, and they fill up their water and haul it in the back of their car to their place of residence, and they use water pretty sparingly. It's really interesting. I think it makes you much more energy and water conscious where you carry every gallon in and every gallon out, essentially.
Transportation in Fairbanks has to be in sync with its environment. Deep cold in the winter and hot summers present huge challenges for the transit agency, especially since they serve an area roughly the size of New Jersey. Director of Transit Michelle Denton gives me the lowdown on their transit system and some of the challenges of working in extreme climates. Michelle, it's great. You got a brand new building. We're inside of it right now here in Fairbanks, and we're standing in your maintenance shop. Tell me about this new building and your agency.
So I think the really exciting thing, we've been running transit, for over 50 years here in the borough, but we've never had a purpose-built facility. So we're just going to be able to serve the public so much better, repair our buses so much faster, have warm vehicles because we have this new space. I think the really important thing to note is that this is the biggest investment the feds have ever taken in our community. So it's 80% federally funded. The project was almost $30 million. So it's really exciting when we see our transit center later this afternoon. That was really the fed's first investment in this community. So the fact that they were willing to see our need and come back and help us with this project is pretty incredible. We're very grateful.
And how long did this project take, Michelle?
We got our first pot of grant money in August of 2016. And so I've been working on the project since we got that first pot of money in August of 2016.
I think that's important for our listeners to know that these projects can take a decade.
They can take a decade.
Yeah.
And actually, prior to that first pot of money from the feds, there were plans for a new transportation facility back in the early 2000s. So our department really has been working on this for a very long time. Many people before me have been working on this. So yeah. So as you and I have discussed, we have these great pull-through bays for my maintenance team, but then we also have warm storage for not only all my current vehicles, but for future growth. And that's a big deal here where it gets to be 60 below in the winter.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your service what you operate here in Fairbanks.
Right now we have 9 fixed routes. We currently are running Monday through Friday service, but when we're fully staffed, we run Monday through Saturday service, and then paratransit, we do that in-house here as well.
That's great. And you're part of the borough government, which is like a county?
Correct. So there are 2 cities in the borough. That's the city of Fairbanks and the city of North Pole. So we serve both of those cities.
Very good. And tell me about the size and the scope of how many people are in the town and your budget and those kind of things.
Sure. So the borough has about 90,000 people, and keep in mind that the borough is massive. We run paratransit here in-house, which is unique to other agencies. We don't contract that out. And so when my drivers come in and they're new with us, a lot of times they will drive paratransit and fixed route. Okay. And so they learn both sides of the house, which is, I think, pretty unique, but also really necessary for a system of our size.
Yeah.
I have about 40 drivers when I'm fully staffed. And so it's important that we're able to cover both paratransit and fixed route.
I mentioned the new building, and I asked her to take me to their current building as well, which we walked around, and like everything here in Fairbanks, has its own unique history.
Originally, it was an International Harvester dealership that the borough bought the building and then cut a bunch of garage doors in. So these are not purpose-built bays at my current facility, certainly not meant to house buses. And then back in the 80s, they did an addition back when you had supercomputers. So there is another part of the facility that can't stand alone because it doesn't actually have restrooms or plumbing. So it's pretty unique, and it has served us well for many years, but this facility will certainly serve us so much better, make us far more efficient, help us serve the public in a much better way.
All right, Michelle, so now we're in your older building, and you just walked me through and you showed me, wow, what a contrast.
Yes, it's a big improvement on our new facility. We're really excited. We're hopefully going to be moving into that new facility, hopefully the beginning of September. That's the goal right now.
Okay, and so this facility here, what will this, you told me, it's like just added on. I can see you're excited about moving. So
Yeah.
what would the transition process look like?
So, the borough has plans for other departments to still be here in this facility, which will make it a little bit easier for us so we can move in stages.
Oh, okay.
But my goal is that we're running operations out of there the beginning of September.
After a lunch with the whole crew, I asked Transportation Manager Dey Johnson about the new facility and what she was looking forward to the most as basically the operations manager for day-to-day services. So we visited your current facility today, and we also got to visit your brand new one. How will that affect operations, you think, going to a new facility?
It will make things smoother and hopefully more efficient and maybe more attractive for new drivers and seeing, new buses and new facilities. It also should help with morale and all the challenges because some of the drivers are, really been stepping up and working a lot of overtime to make sure that we can serve the public. So
yeah. What do you have planned for the future, you think, over the next 5 years? Just moving into a new facility, going to CNG, all that?
Yeah, our big plans are, finishing up this building. We're transitioning our whole fleet to CNG. So once we're done with our bus transition, then we'll go back to our paratransit vans. And then after that, we will be looking, at renewing our software, cameras and our onboarding software as well.
Even working with vendors is a challenge, according to Director Michelle Denton. Everything they do has to be ready for the 150-degree swing in temperatures between the depths of winter and the height of summer. Can you imagine that?
So I like to say that we're not a drop in the bucket, but we're like a grain of sand on the beach when you're dealing with a vendor. And so a lot of times it's just explaining the uniqueness of our system, the uniqueness of our weather, that it's 60 below, but then it can be 90 above, and those different things.
What a swing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then for my patrons, they may be freezing at a bus stop in the winter, or they may be sweating in the summer, kind of like we are right now, right? And so I think just helping people to understand, most people haven't been to Fairbanks. They don't know. This is your first trip to Alaska,
That's right? Yeah.
And so I think that's the unique thing, is helping people understand, because I think when people understand, then they want to help.
The winter creates its own environmental issues, something called temperature inversions. Have you heard of them before? This is when cold air settles into the valley floor and it's capped by warm air above, and that cap keeps pollution trapped at the ground level. From wood stoves to diesel buses, air pollution in the winter is a big issue, and it drives environmental policies there. As Corey tells me, it also affects what vehicles the transit system uses.
But one other thing that was interesting, I thought, was you all were involved in helping them get CMAQ funds, I guess, whatever, to build a brand new facility, right?
Fast planning helps contribute funding to, various types of projects, and money that we were able to help contribute with our CMAQ, the congestion mitigation air quality, that was to help with some of their conversion to compressed natural gas.
Okay.
Because of the geometry of where we live, or the geography here, we're in a low spot in this valley. So in the winter months, what can happen is cold weather can kind of settle in, and then warmer air will sit on top of it and basically keep it trapped. So when it's 40 or 50 below, everything that comes out of your tailpipe, it's almost like that family circus cartoon. You can see the trail of where the vehicle went because the emissions from the tailpipe just linger there in the air for minutes after the vehicle's gone. So we get this really intense accumulation of PM 2.5 and other air quality issues. So our organization is really trying to shift to, different transportation options that emit less.
Michelle tells me more about how the air quality affects their decision on the fuel type of the buses they're moving forward with. One of the interesting things that Jackson, the head of your local MPO, was telling me this morning was the temperature inversions in the winter and the air quality issues, and that's part of the reason for this facility is maybe to move you to compressed natural gas?
Yeah, correct. So we're in serious non-attainment for air quality here in the borough. And so one of the things that I oversee in the transportation department is our air quality division, and we run a wood stove change-out program. And through that partnership with our MPOs, we have gotten some CMAQ funds for this facility. The idea being that we will eventually convert our entire fleet to compressed natural gas. I go down to California a couple weeks from now to inspect our first 3 compressed natural gas buses. And then the delivery of those buses this October will coincide with the completion of our CNG fueling infrastructure. And we will hopefully have those buses out on the road by the end of this year.
Finally, I asked Corey about his role as transit planner and his vision for the future of transit in the region.
So our MPO's focus, like many others, is to try to keep a transportation system modern and well-connected and in a good state of repair.
And so how do you interact with the transit agency, who we've had on the podcast today, their CEO and all that?
Yeah, we work with Max Transit and help facilitate planning, and we're in the process of updating their short and long-term transit plans as well as the coordinated human services plan. So those essentially help identify current challenges and then how to allocate, future investment over the next 10, 15 years. And we're hoping to have that wrapped up here by the end of the year.
So, Corey, where do you see Fairbanks going?
Well, I think that in an ideal world, we start following some of the more progressive national trends, and we encourage things like micromobility, things that have a smaller footprint in terms of air quality impact. There's already a pretty robust winter cycling community here, and that can be hard to believe when it's 40 below. But people, we're starting to outfit our buses with specific racks that you can put fat tire bikes on. So we're trying to encourage and accommodate those. Fast Planning also has a whole program dedicated to encouraging cycling year round, and we, in addition to repaving and rebuilding roads, we have programs that help create new bike paths and basically augment our non-motorized systems.
As I mentioned, it was great meeting everyone in Fairbanks. We stayed at a lovely bed and breakfast there. I felt like I was Bill Murray, in Groundhog Day. That's the kind of bed and breakfast it was. Very cool antique furniture and everything, and coffee in the morning and a great home cooked breakfast. The folks that owned it even opened up. They have one of the old gold camps is now turned into a coffee shop and a saloon there. They opened it up for us, and we had a bunch of folks that we had talked to along the way come and join us there. You'll see some of that on the Transit Unplugged TV show, as well as everything you heard about on this podcast. You can see it with your own eyes as we get to the show later on in the year. Thanks for being with us every week on Transit Unplugged. Every Wednesday, we drop a new episode, an interesting interview with a top public transportation executive talking about their city, their region, their plans, and what you can learn from it. I'm Paul Comfort. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transit Unplugged. I'm Tris Hussey, editor of the podcast, and thank you to all our guests this week, and especially to Corey DiRutigliano, who was the host and fixer for Paul and the crew while in Fairbanks. Coming up next week on the show, we go from the far northwest of the U.S. to the far southeast and Miami. On the show, we have Ulyss Cleckley and Angel Chevarria talking about this massive, first-in-the-nation all-electric bus depot. I think you'll get a charge out of the episode and be shocked at how quickly it all came together. Transit Unplugged is brought to you by Modaxo. At Modaxo, we're passionate about moving the world's people, and at Transit Unplugged, we're passionate about telling those stories. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.